Hi folks, Birdie here, and today we return once again to the realm of Crichton as we review the original film adaptation of Michael Crichton's The Andromeda Strain. So, let's see if this strain is a little less virulent as I throw this to the round table.
Oh god, not that again!
I think Caveman's reaction is due to how much he did not like the Andromeda Strain miniseries we watched a while back.
Whereas you and I loved the miniseries.
It's not that I didn't really like it, it's that Sorry, started thinking about the miniseries.
I think I only watched 20 minutes of that with you guys.
You watched an hour and a half with us.
Really? Wait a minute. Let me try to remember.
That being said, this film's not perfect, but it's pretty damn good. It tells its story tightly, and it doesn't get bogged down by its medical elements. The only parts that were tedious were the parts that were trying to convey boredom.
That's one of the things I liked about this movie. It doesn't feel the need to overplay the medical experimentation and make it seem epic or thrilling. It just plays those scenes out as naturally as possible. They use different medical equipment and processes without having to spoon-feed you explanations on everything. The film assumes you're smart enough to figure that shit out.
The two things I appreciate most about this movie are its scope and its attention to detail. In my mind, good sci-fi requires a lot of attention to detail, and the little details in this film's construction and script were what immersed me in this world. I was really impressed with the amount of complexity and detail put into the lab. The layout feels intuitive, and it's easy for the viewer to keep track of where in the lab they're currently located.
They even color-coded the damn place.
Yeah, the different colors did create a sense of scope, because you know that each level had its own color assigned to it, and thus you know that there are different levels, and it creates a sense of scale. And even though the film doesn't spend that much time outside of the lab, it still makes us care about the threat to the world caused by the virus, and each character's personal investment in their tasks.
Those are two of my favorite things about this movie. Both the characters and the virus are brilliant. Not only does it make sense how the virus exists and how it came to be an energy-absorbing death machine, but you also get invested in the characters. You see their motivations, you get a grasp on their personalities, and you even see glaring character flaws and understand why they would cover them up despite the problems they could cause.
You mean the epileptic chick? Yeah, I commend this movie for making me understand why she would hide that flaw despite the trouble it causes.
And to be fair, I still like her better than Stone, who was just a government douche.
Oh, you mean the scientist who was like, yeah, it seems bad that the government is doing secret shit, but look, bananas!
I don't really think that he was a government douche so much as he was deluding himself into believing the best about his government.
Yeah, and you can sort of understand where he's coming from, since he's probably worked with the government for years, and they've probably funded a lot of his research. But still, he should have been a little skeptical when he came across those disease maps.
These are biological warfare maps.
Well, yes, so they are. But simulations, Charlie. Defensive. It's just a scenario.
That's not the point, for God's sake. Wildfire was built for germ warfare.
But you still buy his arguments. In his mindset, they would have to map these things and plan countermeasures in case of biological attack. And mapping how such weapons would spread, if used, would make sense. Now, it does come off as Stone being somewhat in denial when he says this, but his viewpoint is understandable.
I bought it as a believable character flaw.
We haven't talked much about the virus yet. There are two really scary things to me. The unknown and the simplistic, brilliant shit.
And little white children.
Come play with us, Jimmy. Forever and ever and ever.
The virus is just a bunch of hexagonal life forms that, when they absorb energy, multiply exponentially and kill shit. No tricks, no gimmicks, nothing.
Well, it does have one gimmick. A very specific pH tolerance!
That's for it to survive in the human body, but then again, to survive is kind of a subjective term since we call it a virus, but we don't really know if that's accurate or not.
The movie calls it a silicon-based life form.
Well, yeah, but when you say life form, certain things are implied about the entity. In the book, they had a discussion that questioned the very concept of the term, and I kind of wish they had a scene like that in the movie.
One thing I like about director Robert Wise's approach is that he added his own touches, and he showed that adaptation from book to film can be done well without just copying the book onto the screen note for note. Copying Crichton's narrative style from the 1970s would have probably been a mistake.
That's putting it a bit strongly. He had his shortcomings when it came to execution, but Crichton was brilliant when it came to implementing scientific concepts in a manner that at least felt realistic.
Still, I really hate it when a film adaptation just copies the book note for note.
Well, that's because film is a very different medium. You can't expect a narrative from a book to work the exact same way on the screen.
I understand that, but also a lot of people bitch when adaptations take certain liberties. I did agree with you that when you're adapting something, you should put your own stank on it. But there is such a thing as going too far.
So, Jimmy, what you're saying is, if you like it, then you should have put your stank on it?
I hate you. But yes, in this film, Robert Wise actually managed to counterbalance some of Crichton's shortcomings. Kora, didn't you tell me at some point about Crichton's issues with endings?
Oh yeah, he could not write a resolution to save his life. Once the 90s rolled around, he started getting better, but despite the fact that this film slowed down the ending, it should be said that this is the most loyal Crichton adaptation I've seen.
Jimmy, you said before that you're going to have some audience members that are going to bitch and moan, and all I want to say is, that's how the world works. You're never going to please everybody. You would be lucky to please most people. No matter how good something you create, someone is going to complain and say, Honey Boo Boo is better. For them, they're right. If they like Honey Boo Boo or Nickelback better than, say, Justice League or the Beatles, that's their opinion, and I will defend to the death the right to have it, even if I will strangle them for having it. Now I need to go calm down before I kill someone.
I like Nickelback.
That one song they do multiple times with different names is okay. Then again, if you put on Photograph, I will kill something!
Moving on, another thing I like about this movie is how all three acts of the film are well fleshed out and effective. I'm not saying a film has to have a three-act structure, but this one does, and it is handled well.
I would say that the third and second act blended a bit too much. The rising action was a bit uneven in the climax, but that's nitpicking. Honestly, I only have a few minor complaints about this movie. Some of the effects were rather cheesy, even when you consider the period in which it was made, like the coagulated blood, which for some reason behaves like sand, and the day for night shots at the beginning were pretty bad.
This is science fiction from the early 70s, and you can't expect its effects to go toe-to-toe with the larger budgeted films like Star Wars. We can probably forgive a few things.
I'm just saying that the effects could be distracting. For example, the tungsten removal left the night scenes with this unnatural purple tint.
Let's go back to the characters for a second. One of my favorite scenes was where the epileptic was having seizures and you could tell that she was losing time. It was just wonderfully done.
It did a good job of conveying what was going on without actually having to come out and say it.
While we're talking about favorite scenes, mine was the scene where all the scientists are brought down into the lab and all the security measures and methods of body purification to prevent germ entry into the lab are explained to them. It had a lot of detail and literally many layers of intricacies. But the scene also made me and Caveman cringe because we saw too much.
So much old white ass. Never have I wanted to see a center bar so badly. That's not helping!
Also, you did get a sense of character from all of the cast as they react to these incredibly invasive and embarrassing medical tests. At one point, they get the entire outer layer of their skin fried off.
Aw, they didn't need that. Although suddenly, I really want some fried chicken. So much white meat.
They were so ashy.
But regarding the cast, while it is true that if you stood them up against a marble wall, you'd probably lose sight of them amongst the white, all of the characters had distinct traits and personalities that kept them easy to distinguish.
Whereas the miniseries had enough bland, racially diverse characters that it could be an after-school special.
There was no guy in a wheelchair. There was still one guy in a wheelchair away from being Glee.
Kora, did the movie artificially inflate the climax from what was in the book?
It added the lasers, which I will admit I thought was kind of silly. In the book they had turrets with tranq darts which prevent lab animals from escaping.
Oh, come on. Everything is better with lasers.
I think it makes more sense to use lasers instead of hoping the tranq darts will hit, although those lasers must suck, since that guy kept dodging them.
Well, I guess this movie just didn't have the creativity of Resident Evil with its giant laser nets.
Alright, important point. Who is everyone's favorite character?
Mine was the elderly researcher with the glasses, because he was the only one that didn't seem like he had an agenda or was hiding anything. And he was just trying to do his job while keeping the whippersnappers in line.
Magic! Because he has the most awesome name ever.
Okay, I have to mention this. I will praise the miniseries for making that character's name less of a porn name.
What was the name of the movie?
Major Mancheck.
Oh yeah.
What was his rank in the miniseries?
General.
Yes, because it's bad if he's man-checking majorly, but if he's doing it generally to everyone, then it's fine.
I like the crotchety old man who was being experimented on the whole time. He just had this old curmudgeon-y persona.
Hell of a way to run a hospital.
I like the same elderly researcher the most for basically the same reasons. I did like General Mancheck better in the miniseries, not because the character was written any better, but because they got Andre Braugher to play him.
But even ignoring the parts of the miniseries that weren't in the movie, the miniseries felt like it had more Mancheck.
Oh my.
That's probably because they wanted to make use of Andre Braugher, and with Braugher on their side,
who can stand against us?
We tried to hold off as much as possible, but I think we've reached the point where we can devote some time to comparing the miniseries and the movie.
On that note, you know what's one thing I think we enjoyed about this movie? A lack of random bullshit subplots.
I am perfectly content to think that the dumbass reporter character from the miniseries died in the helicopter crash in this version and was never part of the plot.
You know it probably never existed in this version, right?
No, I prefer to think he died in a fiery crash.
Yeah, the lack of subplots kept the script tight and allowed the movie to expand on and explore everything that was within its scope. The miniseries had a huge scope, but also had glaring plot holes and large aspects of the world and its mythos poorly explained.
Best of all, the film didn't have any time paradoxes. Thank God the plot made sense and didn't require paradoxical plot devices.
It's not the size of the script that counts. It's how you use it.
Mancheck wouldn't say so.
You know, all the rooms in the lab look the same in the miniseries. In the film, even if they do look the same, at least they chose different colors.
They did do a good job of infusing the locations with a sense of personality.
That's the perfect place to start wrapping it up.
I enjoyed this movie immensely. I came into it with some reservations, having seen the miniseries first, but I was willing to give it a chance, and I am so glad I did. The movie is tense, well thought out, well paced, has a lot of character and depth for the story it does have, and it keeps the story tight and contained within a manageable scope. I like the characters, and I really like the setting for its sense of immersion despite some hokey effects. Honestly, I think this film still holds up enough to be viewed today. I would probably buy this if I saw it for cheap, so I will give it a bargain bin. 7 out of 10.
Alright, I liked the movie. It was a lot of fun. Probably the only thing I didn't like was the old ashy white ass shoved in my face, which was just terrible. I enjoyed most of this movie. I liked the characters, I liked the science, I liked the silicon-based entity that could potentially destroy the world. I felt like the climax was kind of stupid, but overall it was a great film. I could see myself watching it again. So I'll give it a late night double feature, 6 out of 10.
I love this movie. I first saw it when I was 4 or 5, and it was really my first foray into sci-fi. Because of that, I consider it a classic. I love the fact that this movie actually gets better as I get older, and can understand the science better. I love how this film expects you to have a brain and doesn't just spoon-feed you bullshit. I respect it even more for that. I like the characters and their development. I won't deny that the climax was kind of a cheap cop-out, but that doesn't change how scary this virus is. I love this movie, and I'm willing to kidnap my children, or my nieces and nephews, and make them watch this. so I feel comfortable giving it an Abduct a Friend. 8 out of 10.
I enjoyed this movie. This is a much more faithful adaptation than the miniseries, and it executes its script far more tightly. What's more, its characters feel like actual characters. I've missed that. I am so glad that this movie successfully spent time with all of them, without boring us to tears. My only real problems with this movie are a few minor technical problems, and some narrative problems retained from its original source material. But it is definitely a strong bargain bin. It's a well-executed film that definitely deserves to be seen. 7 out of 10 from me.
So, with 1 Abduct a Friend, 2 bargain bins, and 1 late night double feature, the MediaWhorz consensus is bargain bin. So, while this strain wasn't all that bad, we probably won't survive the next one.
Because my gay voice is always flirty. I'm always flirting with everything when I'm gay.